Good afternoon. Having searched for ecclesiastical law, I'm redirected to canon law, and I'll just read this. Canon law. Christian law redirects here. For other types of religious law in Christianity, see religious law in Christianity. Canon law is the body of laws and regulations made by ecclesiastical authority, church leadership, for the government of Christian organization or church and its members. It is the internal ecclesiastical law governing the Catholic Church, both Latin Church and Eastern Catholic churches, the Eastern and Oriental Orthodox churches, and the Anglican Communion of Churches. The way that such church law is legislated, interpreted, and at times adjudicated varies widely among these three bodies of churches. In all three traditions, a canon was originally a rule adopted by a church council. These canons formed the foundation of canon law. Etymology. Greek canon, Arabic canon, Hebrew. A rule, code, standard, or measure. The root meaning in all these languages is reed, the Romance language ancestors of the English word cane. Next heading, Canons of the Apostles. Main article, Canons of the Apostles. Might be interesting to come back to later. Anyway, the Apostolic Canons, or ecclesiastical canons of the same holy apostles, is a collection of ancient ecclesiastical decrees, 85 in the Eastern, 50 in the Western Church, concerning the government and discipline of the early Christian Church, incorporated with the apostolic constitutions, which are part of the ante-Nicene Fathers in the 4th century. The First Council of Nicaea, 325, calls canons the disciplinary measures of the Church. The term canon means in Greek a rule. There is a very early distinction between the rules enacted by the Church and the legislative measures taken by the state, called leges, Latin for laws. Next heading, Catholic Church. In the Catholic Church, canon law is the system of laws and principles made and enforced by the Church's hierarchical authorities to regulate its external organization and government, and to order and direct the activities of Catholics toward the mission of the Church. The Roman Catholic Church canon law also includes the main 5 rites, groups of churches, which are in full union with the Roman Catholic Church and the Supreme Pontiff. Number 1, the Alexandrian Rite churches, which include the Coptic Catholic Church and Ethiopian Catholic Church. Number 2, the West Syrian Rite, which includes the Maronite Church, Syriac Catholic Church, and the Syro-Malankara Church. Number 3, Armenian Rite Church, which includes the Armenian Catholic Church. Number 4, Byzantine Rite churches, which include the Albanian Byzantine Catholic Church, Belarusian Greek Catholic Church, Bulgarian Church, Byzantine Church of Croatia, Serbia and Montenegro, Greek Church, Hungarian Greek Catholic Church, Italo-Albanian Church, Macedonian Greek Catholic Church, Melkite Church, Romanian Church united with Rome, Greek Catholic, Russian Church, Ruthenian Church, Slovak Greek Catholic Church, and Ukrainian Catholic Church. Number 5, East Syrian Rite churches, which includes the Chaldean Church and Syro-Malabar Church. All of these church groups are in full communion with the Pope and subject to the code of canons of the Eastern churches. In the Roman Catholic Church, universal positive ecclesiastical laws based upon either immutable divine and natural law, or changeable, circumstantial, and merely positive law, derive formal authority and promulgation from the office of Pope, who as Supreme Pontiff possesses the totality of legislative, executive, and judicial power in his person. The actual subject material of the canons is not just doctrinal or moral in nature, but all-encompassing of the human condition. There's a subheading, History, Sources of Law, and Codifications. And there's a main article to this, Legal History of the Catholic Church. I'd like to read that. Hope I remember to. The Catholic Church has what is claimed to be the oldest continuously functioning internal legal system in Western Europe, much later than Roman law, but predating the evolution of modern European civil law traditions. What began with rules, canons, adopted by the apostles at the Council of Jerusalem in the 1st century, has developed into a highly complex legal system encapsulating not just the norms of the New Testament, but some elements of the Hebrew, Old Testament, Roman, Visigothic, Saxon, and Celtic legal traditions. The history of Latin canon law can be divided into 4 parts: the Jus Antiquum, the Jus Novum, the Jus Novissimum, and the Code of Canon Law. In relation to the Code, history can be divided into the Jus Vetus, all law before the Code, and the Jus Novum, the law of the Code, or Jus Codicis. The canon law of the Eastern Catholic Churches, which had developed some different disciplines and practices, underwent its own process of codification, resulting in the Code of Canons of the Eastern Churches, promulgated in 1990 by Pope John Paul II. Another subheading, Catholic canon law as legal system. It is a fully developed legal system, with all the necessary elements, courts, lawyers, judges, a fully articulated legal code, principles of legal interpretation, and coercive penalties, though it lacks civilly binding force in most secular jurisdictions. The academic degrees in canon law are the JCB, Juris Canonici Baccalaureatus, Bachelor of Canon Law, normally taken as a graduate degree. JCL, Juris Canonici Licentiatus, for the Licentiate of Canon Law, and the JCD, Juris Canonici Doctor, Doctor of Canon Law. Because of its specialized nature, advanced degrees in civil law or theology are normal prerequisites for the study of canon law. Much of the legislative style was adapted from the Roman law code of Justinian. As a result, Roman ecclesiastical courts tend to follow the Roman law style of continental Europe, with some variation, featuring collegiate panels of judges and an investigative form of proceeding called inquisitorial, for the Latin inquire, to enquire. This is in contrast to the adversarial form of proceeding found in the common law system of English and U.S. law, which features such things as juries and single judges. The institutions and practices of canon law paralleled the legal development of much of Europe, and consequently both modern civil law and common law legal system bear the influences of canon law. Edson Luiz Sampel, a Brazilian expert in canon law, says that canon law is contained in the genesis of various institutes of civil law, such as the law in continental Europe and Latin American countries. Sampel explains that canon law has significant influence in contemporary society. Canonical jurisprudential theory generally follows the principles of Aristotelian Thomistic legal philosophy. While the term law is never explicitly defined in the Code, the Catechism of the Catholic Church cites Aquinas in defining law as an ordinance of reason for the common good promulgated by the one who is in charge of the community, and reformulates it as a rule of conduct enacted by competent authority for the sake of the common good. Another subheading here, the Code for Eastern Churches. The law of Eastern Catholic churches in full union with Rome was in much the same state as that of the Latin or Western Church before 1917. Much more diversity in legislation existed in the various Eastern Catholic churches. Each had its own special law in which custom still played an important part. In 1929, Pius XI, that's 11, informed the Eastern churches of his intention to work out a code for the whole of the Eastern Church. The publication of these codes for the Eastern churches regarding the law of persons was made between 1949 through 1958, but finalized nearly 30 years later. The first Code of Canon Law, 1917, was mostly for the Roman Rite, with limited application to the Eastern churches. After the Second Vatican Council, 1962-65, another edition was published specifically for the Roman Rite in 1983. Most recently, 1990, the Vatican produced the Code of Canons of the Eastern Churches, which became the first code of the Eastern Catholic canon law. Okay, another heading here, talking about Orthodox churches. The Greek-speaking Orthodox have collected canons and commentaries upon them in a work known as the Pedalion. Probably saying that wrong, but in Greek I guess that means rudder. So named because it is meant to steer the church. The Orthodox Christian tradition in general treats its canons more as guidelines than as laws, the bishops adjusting them to cultural and other local circumstances. Some Orthodox canon scholars point out that had the ecumenical councils, which deliberated in Greek, meant for the canons to be used as laws, they would have called them nomoi, laws, rather than kanones, rules. But almost all Orthodox conform to them. The dogmatic decisions of the councils, though, are to be obeyed rather than to be treated as guidelines, since they are essential to the Church's unity. Another heading, Anglican Communion. There's a main article, Canon Law, Anglican Communion. In the Church of England, the ecclesiastical courts that formerly decided many matters such as disputes relating to marriage, divorce, wills, and defamation still have jurisdiction of certain church-related matters. Example, discipline of clergy, alteration of church property, and issues related to churchyards. Their separate status dates back to the 12th century, when the Normans split them off from the mixed secular religious county and local courts used by the Saxons. In contrast to other courts of England, the law used in ecclesiastical matters is at least partially a civil law system, not common law, although heavily governed by parliamentary statutes. Since the Reformation, ecclesiastical courts in England have been royal courts. The teaching of canon law at the universities of Oxford and Cambridge was abrogated by Henry VIII. Thereafter, practitioners in the ecclesiastical courts were trained in civil law, receiving a Doctor of Civil Law (DCL) degrees from Oxford or a Doctor of Laws (LLD) degree from Cambridge. Such lawyers, called doctors and civilians, were centered at Doctors' Commons, a few streets south of St. Paul's Cathedral in London, where they monopolized probate, matrimonial, and admiralty cases until their jurisdiction was removed to the common law courts in the mid-19th century. Other churches in the Anglican Communion around the world, Example, the Episcopal Church in the United States and the Anglican Church of Canada still function under their own private systems of canon law. Currently, 2004, which isn't very current, there are principles of canon law common to the churches within the Anglican Communion. Their existence can be factually established. Each province or church contributes through its own legal system to the principles of canon law common with the Communion. These principles have a strong persuasive authority and are fundamental to the self-understanding of each of the churches of the Communion. These principles have a living force and contain in themselves the possibility of further development, and the existence of these principles both demonstrates unity and promotes unity within the Anglican Church. Almost done here. Presbyterian and Reformed churches. The main article, Presbyterian polity. In Presbyterian and Reformed churches, canon law is known as practice and procedure, or church order, and includes the church's laws respecting its government, discipline, legal practice, and worship. Roman canon law had been criticized by the Presbyterian as early as 1572 in the admonition to Parliament. The protest centered around the standard defense that canon law could be retained so long as it did not contradict the civil law. According to Pauli Ha, the Reformed Church government refuted this claim, claiming that the bishops had been enforcing canon law for 1500 years. Lutheranism. The Book of Concord is the historic doctrinal statement of the Lutheran Church, consisting of 10 creedal documents recognized as authoritative in Lutheranism since the 16th century. However, the Book of Concord is a confessional document stating orthodox beliefs, rather than a book of ecclesiastical rules or discipline, like canon law. Each Lutheran national church establishes its own system of church order and discipline, though these are referred to as canons. And lastly, the United Methodist Church. The Book of Discipline contains the laws, rules, policies, and guidelines for the United Methodist Church. Its last edition was published in 2012.